Hi, my name is Rita. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I promise that there'll be guests this time, and my first guest is called Mitchelle. She will introduce herself. Forgive us, we're going to have random conversations with you, but I hope you keep watching, and I hope you learn something.
I'm still laughing because you said I have to introduce myself, and I was like, who am I? What am I doing? So my name is Mitchelle. Ivy. I'm a writer and a storyteller, and right now apparently I'm into graphics design. So
I love your graphics. I love your graphics.
you.
Like sometimes I'm like, should I tell her to draw me, or
I cannot draw anybody, sadly.
to us? No, like the graphics that you make, but then you say, oh, this is Rita.
That's true. I should consider. I consider when I was doing the poetry card, I like put like all my friends, like I looked for the closest pictures to them. I threw them in like all the cards, and I'm like, so it's one with a cat, and I'm like, that's my friend Melissa. Even the hair is just big. And I'm like, oh, that's so. Like I got all my friends, and I don't even think they know it. I'm like, you're just there sitting in people's homes. People are carrying you in their bag.
You sold
I sold you off. You guys were merchandise, and you're not suing me for rights. But yeah, so I tell stories, I write poetry. Apparently, like, it's very weird. I can't say I'm even one thing because somehow I've just kept transitioning into different things. And
I think like that's the thing. Like you can't be boxed. You're one of those people
Oh,
who are free spirits. Even when it comes to your creativity, you are such a free spirit, and I'm always like, oh, what does she have next? Yeah, I really love it.
Half the time I'm like, everybody hates me, but I'm like, okay, let's try and love ourselves. If everybody's hating you, at least let's be the person who loves me. Then I'm like, I like making jokes about myself too much, and I like to laugh, so sorry.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about a very delicate, controversial topic.
Which sadly we may laugh about.
Yes, we might laugh, but it's a very serious topic. We're going to talk about suicide.
Because it is the month.
Yeah.
Just a heads up, my birthday is exactly 7 days from now. So I'm like, is she trying to tell me that she's sending a hitman? Because I'm like, why? Why? We're talking about suicide.
Yeah, so Mitchelle, what's your stand on suicide? What do you think about it? Like when you hear suicide, do you think like it's a one-time thing, like it happens and you're like, yay, I'm healed, I'm now happy and it's not going to happen to me again? Or what do you think about suicide? Have you been suicidal before?
Let me say, obviously. I was like, oh, people saw me laughing, and they might be like, oh, what? Okay, I've been suicidal since I was like 5, I think, or even younger. I feel like if I had memories of me before 5, I'd be like, I just always run. Like it's not even running. It's just like I'm like. Let me quote up. I think this will be like a thingy. When a lady was talking once about if a bank robbery happened, because she's a teller, she's like, you guys, I know you think I would be the person who would come and like save you, but like immediately the robbers come pointing guns, I'm just going to fold into a ball and sleep. And like I'm like, I don't know what will be happening around me, but I'll just be sleeping. So I think for me, my suicide is usually a situation of I just need a break. Like, this is too much. This is a headache. Bye. Like, if we don't wake up, it's not the worst thing that happens. And sometimes, like, it sounds like so ghastly if you haven't like been in that place before. And and like, but it's
and so selfish.
I am naturally selfish, so I'm like, if this is going to be so called selfish, I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, yeah, it's okay. God, like me and God have talked.
Do you know when you say it since 5, you were suicidal? Like this week, I've been remembering. I have a lot of memory gaps, but I've been remembering. We had a housemate who once told me I had very ugly lips. So,
is she gonna kiss them?
I don't know. I don't know why she was looking at my lips like that, first of all. Anyway, so I remember going to my mom's room, and there was a bottle of Vanish. So I was like, since there's no lipstick, maybe let me try this. And it was so painful.
What's gonna be painful? Vanish those days had like over snake blood to make it extra red. Like the ingredients are very freaky. Snail. You're like, what? This is cosmetics. Like you're gonna just get like fat, juicy. Like they're just gonna swell up.
So since they're painful, and I didn't want my mom to know I'd done it, I saw a scissor and I wanted to cut off my lips.
Oh, I've had those. Yeah.
So
it's so painful.
I think that was one of my first self-harm thoughts. Like, why don't I cut off these lips and just not have lips? And maybe no one will look at me like that. And I didn't consider that I'll be the lipless person people would look at.
Yeah, you just looking to fix the problem. Like, what's the quickest fix to this? Like, what is the thing? Not even the quickest, because you're going to calculate options. It's not like it's the one option. You're like, what is the solution that ends all this misery? And like, we just take a nap.
Yeah.
And then the worst part is that I have insomnia, so I'm not those people who you can tell just go. I'm like, you guys, it's a lot of preparation to sleep. I have to like go outside and start walking for like 2 hours. I'm like, it's like God is telling me. Remember when your mommy used to tell you that she'd have to like push you in your pram to take you to sleep, and you're like, it was not a big headache. I'm like, now you have to push yourself in the pram. You have to get your pram.
You have to rock yourself. So much effort. So much effort. Anyway, now back to suicide. You know, like how people feel like, this person just had an attempt and it went. As in, for me, it's like I always have these ideations. Like, if something doesn't go my way or a minor inconvenience, my brain is like, we cannot just throw ourselves off a building.
Like, you're always waiting. Okay, so I think the best part about doing poetry on Instagram is that it's such a big community, and then you've reached so many. Because I like to use the word spooning because I have my energy is just like very little. And so I met a girl. She's called, I forget her name. I was going to call her. I would give her a name of another whole. She's called Molly. And then she told me her favorite poet is I think Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. But she told me who her favorite poet was, and I went and like read up on the person. And this poet, apparently, like, she'd always be thinking about suicide. Like, she had friends, and their idea of a good time is just, like, going and sitting and talking about how stressed they are and, like, the way they kill themselves. And they're like, we're not going to do it today, but there's going to be a time, and this is probably what I'm going to do. And it seems dark and twisted, but I'm like, if you're always in pain, you have no idea how, like, taking that step forward and be like, okay, I was going to try and exist today. Like, let's just see what it brings. Let's just, like, the idea of tomorrow feels like a whole lifetime. Like, how do we wait till tomorrow? And I'm such an introvert. But like, no, you're not. Okay, and then I'm like, okay, fine, I'm a Hamid. I just don't want to be around people. Because it's so much work and energy. And so I'm like, I don't have people to hold my hand all the time. I never had like community of like, I have friends. And people say, I've had this friend since childhood. I'm like, like how none of you got tired of the other person? Like, they didn't die? Like, how? I'm like, wow.
You know, the funny thing is, I've had friends since childhood, but most of them didn't even know about the suicidal side of me. It's like I had two sides. Yeah, it's like I had the side that faced the darkness and was in continuous pain, which was 90% of me, and then the 10% was the pretentious side that I would like wear a mask, and I'm so good at masking. I could be dying and I'm masking it and smiling.
How happy I look right now. I am terrified.
How are you?
This is very scary.
I am so fine. It's so sad. It's really sad. And then I come and then my brain's like, no, you're not fine. You're really not. And then sometimes I'm like, okay, let me try this thing of trying. Oh, I'm not fine. And then someone is like, okay, what can I do to help? I'm like, I don't know. Like, what do you tell people?
I have a list. I'm like, because I think, okay, now for me, because they ask you to think of tools, like when you're suicidal. So I'm more suicidal ideation. And then, like, I can just, like, it needs, like, a build-up to tip me off to, like, suicide. So my suicides, the ones that are, like, coma, like, inducing, because there's a brief of time, because like not one thing is just gonna like make me. I'm like, it's just like the needle, the haze building up, and then boom, explosion. I'm like, oh, I have a list for if I am being dark. I'm like, I probably need to eat. So just make sure I'm always eating. If my body has energy, we'll go outside and walk. I need to be walking, because if I am not walking, I'm gonna just start like feeling like, oh, this is all there is to life. Just me right now. And it feels like you're in a whole void. I'm like, people fear small spaces. I'm like, you guys, do you know how big the world is? Like, that is scary in itself. I'm like, the sun looks like this. Like, my perception is like a whole other issue. And I'm like, the sun looks so little, and it's burning the world. Like, it's tiny little things like come into my head, and then it becomes like a loop of a process, and my thought forms, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what if this is hell, and like that's why we're burning, and then it goes back around, and it's like, oh my gosh, do you remember that time when you got burned and then you couldn't walk? And then it goes, and I'm like, oh my god, I have to be walking and having a conversation with myself, otherwise like the thoughts are just gonna sink in, and then so I usually just need like conversation.
So do you have like a suicide first aid list of activities? Because they made me do that when I was in psych ward. What activities to do? Don't laugh.
My experience was this. I'm sorry.
So before I had to leave psych ward, I had to come up with a list of things to do if I was suicidal before I actually attempt, because I they're supposed to get me out, like, you know how you do the walk to get you out.
Okay, so here's the thing. Okay, that is very dramatic. How can you tell? That's like punishing somebody. Reckless. So I know the walking works, but that's because, let's say, right now I'm like in psychosis. Like it may not seem, because you're like, I seem so here. I'm like, in my head, I'm not here. Like this is just like a part of a dream. And then if I go to sleep and wake up, I will be like, oh, did this happen? Oh, I vaguely remember it. But every attempt is different, because like different triggers. It's not one thing that triggers you. It's not one situation. So I know the walking works, but to get to the place of the walking, my favorite person is here. To get to the place of the walking, I have to talk to myself, see what's up. I'm like, okay, so why do we feel like ending our lives is the solution right now? Then it's probably something stupid like, he's not been texting me for 2 weeks and I feel useless. And I'm like, hey. First of all, that's very stupid. Like, I don't have the remorse of, like, because people like the thing of self-love. Like, you have to bath tap. I'm like, hey. First of all, I cannot fit in a bathtub. Like, they're not building European style anymore. Everything is like Japan and America.
It's like so small. I can't fit in my bathtub too.
Why are you wasting
like I have to bend like the whole time. I'm like this, and then I feel like I'm imprisoned, and I'm like, this isn't self-care no more.
This isn't self-care. I'm like, and that's also quite expensive. So for me, my self-care is a lot of being mean. It seems like it's mean, but I've found a method where I can be mean to myself, but then find humor in it. Like, I understand that it's just criticism. I'm not saying I hate you, because even when like an outsider gives me criticism, I'm like, they want me to be dead. I'm like, I'm just so dramatic in my head. I'm like, I don't know where I got it from. I know where I got it from.
Where did you get it from, Mitchelle?
It's a whole story. We're not going to go.
Okay.
But like, it's sort of knowing where I spend so much time with myself, because I have to know where my traumas are.
Yeah.
I have to know, what is this reminding me of? What am I replicating? What memories is that's coming back? Is there a pain that I hid under like all this Pandora's pile? And sort of just like doing the deep dive into yourself and being okay with the trash you'll find, because you're so to because I really, when I'm like, oh my gosh, I was such a douchebag. And I hated the person because I thought they were at fault.
Yes, and you find you are at fault.
Apologies are the worst, but you have to do that.
I think that's one of the things I did first. I had to go out and apologize to people I had. And you know, the hardest part was forgiving myself, because it was, even hurting them was unintentional. It came from such a broken and dark space, and in that moment I felt what I was doing was justified or right. Yeah, so I was like, really, brain, we got this wrong. how dare you get this wrong?
There's so many of them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm half the time. It's like, how do I tell you? I'm like, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna see Rita, but Rita hates me so much. I'm gonna remember to text him like, oh my gosh, should I want to hear from you? You were such a pest. And I'm like, but she replies my messages. Like, we have conversations. I know where she lives. So like, what is happening? And then I have to remind myself, like, you're just like probably nervous because you know she doesn't text as much as you do. Or also the thing of the heart spaces when we're supposed to like co-found it, and then I was like going through my own things, and I was like, I don't even know what's happening. And then I'm like, I have a bit of guilt there. It's like tiny things, and then you're like, oh, but then there's a resolve, and it's fine now. Like you don't have to always be like, I did one wrong thing, and then like I'm forever to be judged. Like, oh gosh,
and I have to punish myself and not exist. No,
that's actually a type of self-harm. Actually, this. Oh my god.
Yes.
Talking back to yourself is self-harm. Just as not dealing with your trauma and your trauma points is self-harm to yourself in the long run.
It is. It really is. And you know how people think self-harm is just like cutting and mostly putting yourself in harm's way. I've learned self-harm is a lot of little things like I will know I'm so broke, I need food, and then intentionally go out and buy a pair of shoes. That is self-harm.
Mine is very Paris. I'm like, need a new pair of shoes, and I'm like, Michelle, you can afford it, and I'm like, I can afford the burger instead. Like, thank you. I'll just get pizza for the week. We're fine. We'll reuse the shoes. And then I'm like, so it's just so many little things that I still have. What?
Recently, the rain was falling heavily, so I have a bad chest and a mathematic. But I was like, you know what? The world is an amazing place. Let's just walk in the rain and ignore all these things and be happy.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And like now I've had to wake up early and be in the sun for the whole week because I played in the rain last week. And again like on Sunday. In fact it was Sunday this time. I'm like, oh Michelle, why? Like you're the one who can't breathe. You're the one who
yes,
you're doing extra inhaling exercise to exist. Your back is like, I'm tired of holding. And then you're there, we're saying
and you know, after this whole time, I've had such a bad chest, and I was like, because I'm trying to clear it and breathe at the same time. And in my head, I'm like, did you really have to show your positivity that way by walking in the rain?
But then I also, like, to be fair though, I'm like, the oxytocin is worth the pain. Like, I get so little pleasure from things. Yes. I'm like, yes, it's gonna hurt my chest, but then also, nothing else has brought me joy in a long time.
I know, yes, yes. I so relate.
Like,
I so relate.
Like, it's a spectrum of, you can pick it, you can pick, like, it's how you find someone who's like, oh, I don't smoke cigarettes, but I drink alcohol till my liver is dead. I'm like, you picked your poison, great. No, I'm gonna be twirling. I'm gonna be Cinderella. Like, oh my god. I look at myself and I'm like, I understand that you need the joy, so I will not roast you today. And then I just let myself have the joy, and I'm like, okay, we'll fix this in, like, there's a thing my favorite podcast is, we'll fix it in post. Like, we'll edit the whole situation with brain. But then you find yourself like, I told my friend I'm not being this guy's car again ever, and my friend is like, you're gonna be there tomorrow, and I'm like, no, I promise I will never, like, me and this person, it's just done. So much energy, like, we're not even started. Unless we're done, we're not even started. I'm like, they're just giving you a lift, why is this thing? And then the next evening it was me
with your little legs
going around town, not even on my route. I'm like, I want to spend time with this person. I'm like, Michelle, you're just insane. Like, this is what, in fact, let me say it here. People like to ask me, why are you single, Michelle? Because I am high maintenance. I have to spend so much time walking.
Yes.
Like, I'm awake at 3 a.m. You're probably sleeping. Then I'll think like you're angry, but you're actually sleeping because I have insomnia and I do not understand that, you know, like human beings
people
actually
have normal sleep patterns.
I'm like, you guys are sleeping at 3 a.m.? Like, are you fine? I'm like, I'm literally going to bed. I'm going to be up at 5. Like, are you sick?
As in, for me, I felt like it's the cheapest option. Because you're going to have a fight, and you know the other person will just have a fight and leave it
I
there.
don't even have to buy shoes
going to
because you
have
said
to
the
buy-
shoe thing. I'd have to buy pizza.
And then I'm going to have a relapse, and then I'm going to have a ketamine
Go
infusion.
through the process,
and
then go through the healing from the ketamine.